If you got trapped in a magical field of tall grass with no escape in sight, what would you do? In this How to Beat video, we'll make like Houdini and try to break free from the shackles of Mother Nature. So grab a seat as we take a trip down memory lane to try and beat in the tall grass. Siblings Cal and Becky are driving to San Diego as Becky is pregnant and wants to give the baby up for adoption. Becky's feeling car sick, so they pull over next to a church. As they're discussing if adoption is the right choice, they hear a boy calling for help. Cal parks the car next to the church as Becky tries talking to the boy. Cal says the boy is right next to them and, throwing caution to the wind, hauls ass into the grass. Becky follows after him, but as they're about to find out, they just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Okay, before I'd be willing to jump headfirst into the unknown, there's a few things to keep note of. As far as we are made aware, there are currently 2 people stuck in the grass. However, if we had spent even 2 seconds exploring our surroundings, we'd see that there are quite a few abandoned cars by the church. I doubt they were willingly left there. If there are other people around, there should be some signs of life. I would at the very least check out the cars or glance inside the church to see if anyone is in there. If not, it's time to interview the kid. Before I'd even consider stepping 1 foot in the grass, I would grill the boy for answers. I would ask him simple questions like, why are you out here? Where are your parents? Are we the first to arrive? Approximately how long ago did you get trapped? Was that woman your mom? If he's unable, or rather unwilling, to answer these questions, take the car and get the hell out of Dodge. As we're driving, we can phone the cops and give away our location. They are certainly more equipped to deal with the situation. Based on Cal and Becky's nonchalant attitudes and light clothing, they are not ready for whatever could be in there. There could be snakes.
Dude, what is he capable of? Is he gonna hurt my manager, my tour manager? Is he gonna hurt somebody I love?
There could be ticks. There could be traps. Or there could even be the CIA waiting to assassinate you, just like they assassinated JFK back in 1963. Anyway, it's not unusual for bandits to use women and children to lure unsuspecting victims. As long as we're in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, we should take precautions. If we still decide to go in, I would suggest that Cal heads in by himself while Becky stands guard by the car. She is 6 months pregnant after all. Once we are inside the grass, we need to make sure we don't walk too far from the road, and preferably mark our path somehow. Cal and Becky end up getting separated, and Becky's phone starts losing its connection. It was working until she walked further into the grass, so something must be jamming the signal. Cal, on the other hand, left both his phone and glasses in the car for some unknown reason, and keeps walking deeper to try and find Tobin, the kid. Tobin's calls for help sound more and more like a recording until he becomes quiet and unresponsive.
Tobin!
Cal and Becky are both feeling uncomfortable at this point, so they agree to regroup and deal with Tobin later. But something is wrong. Despite Becky not moving an inch, her voice is getting further and further away and coming from different directions.
Stop! I overshot you somehow.
Cal, quit fucking around. This isn't funny.
Becky?
Yeah?
And then the same happens to Cal's voice.
Cal, stop walking away!
I didn't move.
To quote Selena Gomez, everything is not what it seems. Something must be distorting the sound or messing with their hearing, so they attempt to jump and look above the grass. On the first jump, Cal is close by, but on the second jump, Cal has magically teleported further away. Now a bit more panicked, Cal sprints through the grass until he faceplants in the mud. They spend the rest of the day walking aimlessly without getting closer to either each other nor the road. As Becky sits down to rest, a man unexpectedly shows up. He introduces himself as Ross, Tobin's daddy, and tells her to follow him as he knows a way out. Becky asks him why he's still there if he knows a way out, and expresses that he's looking for a son and wife. Becky's hesitant, but agrees to go with him. On the one hand, it's hard to disagree with her. She's exhausted and doesn't have very many options. But on the other hand, I would not trust this guy. His story is believable, but no one who's trapped would be this calm about it. We've been in here a long ass time. I also find it weird how he's never said anything until now, despite Cal and Becky yelling at each other every 20 seconds. For now, I would follow him, but I'd be ready to dropkick him from behind at a moment's notice. As they're walking, Ross proceeds to question Becky, even though it should be the other way around. She bumps into something and gets distracted, losing Ross in the process. As she's calling out to him, something or someone jumps her.
Cal!
Elsewhere, Cal's not doing much better. He breaks down in tears when yet again, someone unexpectedly shows up.
You can find things, but it's easier once they're dead.
It's Tobin, carrying a dead crow. He says that the field doesn't move dead things around and buries the crow in the ground. He then says that Becky will die soon. Tobin knows they're siblings because the rock told him. He then says the rock lets you hear the tall grass, and the tall grass knows everything. Tobin agrees to bring Cal to the rock since it will help him find Becky. The boys make it into a new area where there is indeed a giant rock. Tobin exclaims how good it feels to touch it and ushers Cal over. Cal raises his arm to touch it, but at the last second, Becky's screams pull him out of it.
Becky!
Sorry, Cal.
He runs back into the grass in a last-ditch attempt to save her.
Becky! Becky!
Okay, at first, it sounds like Tobin is spouting utter nonsense. My first guess would be that he lost his mind after being stuck alone for several days. But it is clear that he knows something. Not only does he know Becky's Cal's sister, but he managed to find Cal just as Cal had given up hope. That timing is suspicious. Cal also stupidly ignores a major red flag. When he asked if Tobin lured them in there, Tobin hesitates for a second and then says no. We know for a fact that Tobin was the one yelling for help, so he's either lying or someone imitated his voice. But if that was the case, Tobin would have heard it as well and mentioned it, but instead he dodges the question. I'd also make him clarify what he meant by the grass not moving dead things around. If he's saying the grass is sentient and working against us, we have a problem. If what Tobin says is true, anything dead could technically suffice, including humans, animals, or even bugs. We could hypothetically leave a trail of dead fruit flies in our path. The definition of being dead is something that is no longer alive or deprived of life. I'm not sure how up-to-date Tobin is on the dictionary, so his definition of dead might not be totally accurate. It could be worth ripping apart pieces of our clothing and using it to maximize the length of our trail. An inanimate object is technically not alive, so it's something we should keep in mind. We can't put our full trust in Tobin, but I'd still follow him and see where he takes us. Once he takes us to the rock's location and receives a dopamine hit from touching it, we know he's at least partially honest.
Boy, that feels good.
When Cal goes face to face with a rock, it's almost like he's locked in a trance, so I'd keep my distance. If Gollum over here refuses to help us any further unless we touch his precious, I'd prepare for a worst case scenario. Although it doesn't need to come to that yet. One luxury we have is that we are both bigger and stronger than Tobin. Children are notoriously gullible, so I'd fake interest until I'm close enough to grab a hold of him. Once he's our hostage, we can force him to guide us back to either Becky or the road, whatever is more urgent. It's obvious we can't make it out of here without his help. If he still won't help us after we pick him up, we might be forced to resort to torture. I know what you're thinking, it's extremely cold-blooded, but if Tobin would rather have us die of dehydration, I'm taking him with me. One thing I would not do is run back into the grass, but as Cal has shown, he isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. A few months later, Travis is out looking for Cal and Becky. As he passes by the church, he recognizes Cal's car and goes exploring. The church is still empty, but he spots a maternity book by the side of the road. It just so happens to have Becky's name, which leads us back into the grass. He breaks apart some leaves to not get lost, but they unbuckle themselves when he's not looking. As nighttime hits, he lies down to rest when he's jump scared by our favorite little stalker. Tobin knows who Travis is and claims they met before, which doesn't make sense because Travis just arrived. Knowing what Travis is after, Tobin brings him to the decaying corpse of Becky. That must have been her scream earlier. As he looks over his shoulder, Tobin has disappeared yet again. Travis then spends the rest of the night crying until he passes out. As Professor Oak would say, there's a time and place for everything, but not now. I'm not against him mourning, but whatever killed her might still be out here. After 2 months, the human body should be plenty decomposed and not too difficult to pick apart. In other words, I would look to tear off her bones and use it as an improvised weapon. The femur would be a solid choice, with it being both the strongest and longest bone in the human body. Because it is the strongest, it is also the most difficult to dislodge. So really any leg bone would suffice. Hell, just pick up the entire leg if you can, whatever works. Now, chopping up a loved one and ransacking their corpse is gonna cause quite a considerable amount of trauma, but that is something we can look to deal with once we get rescued. We could also move her into a more strategic position, so she's always visible. Not doing anything and leaving empty-handed is a missed opportunity. Travis instead fishes out an amulet to remember her by and looks to find a way out. Okay, now pay attention, cause shit's crazy. Travis hears someone talking outside the grass, and it's Tobin and his family. Travis calls for help, but the dog runs into the grass and everyone follows suit. Travis is like, no, don't go in there, but whoops, too late. They all split apart one by one, an entire day passes, and Ross eventually finds the sentient rock. Now it's suddenly daytime again, then Cal and Becky show up, despite already being inside the grass, and maybe dead, maybe not. So now Travis, Cal, Becky, and Tobin, but not that Tobin, are all in the grass at the same time. All of that makes sense? No? Great, then we're on the same page. So now we have the exact same scenario as earlier, but with some Travis sprinkled in.
Becky, it's me, Travis!
Travis?
What?
Tobin decides to chime in and says someone killed Freddy, the dog. Because he's now by something that's dead, the others manage to find him and regroup. Travis explains that it's been 2 months since Cal and Becky disappeared, even though to them it's only been a few minutes. Lacking options, Travis hoists Tobin up on his shoulders, who spots a building in the distance. They make it their next target and head in that direction. Tensions are high, with Cal finding it suspicious that Travis is in there. Things calm down as they discuss the baby, but their bonding is cut short as the phone suddenly rings. It is Becky's voice, echoing not to let Cal hurt Travis. Stay with him, or else we will keep making the same mistakes. They think nothing of it and continue onward. I think it is safe to say we are not dealing with the smartest bunch. Instead of saying, what the hell was that? How about, that was Becky's voice? Why would she tell us this? The how is irrelevant, because the grass doesn't abide by our laws of nature. Travis already knows that there's more than one Becky running around. For all we know, there could be several. This is the Cal and Becky that had just entered the grass. We'll call them Cal and Becky 2.0. Becky number 1 died and Cal number 1 went missing in the grass somewhere. Travis needs to jump on this opportunity and be like, guys, hear me out. We should listen to her. What phone Becky says should be taken at face value, which means Cal is going to do something to either injure or kill Travis. So Cal, put your ego aside and don't do that. Simple, I know. You don't need to be a detective to recognize that Cal dislikes Travis, but survival should be a bigger factor than their dick measuring contest. I don't really think Becky cares either way. As for repeating the same mistakes, I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that they are stuck in a sort of time loop. I know it's a bit of a stretch, but with Tobin 1.0 saying we are connected, with Cal and Becky respawning after death, with Travis being the linchpin that connects everyone together, going as far as to enter the grass before anyone else, it is a solid theory. Basically what this means is that Cal has to not do anything to Travis. If Becky comes across a phone that works, do not copy and paste the same speech, keep Tobin away from the rock, as there is a version of him that touched it, and pay attention in case we feel a strong sense of deja vu. There's no guarantee that it will break the cycle and release us, but we are running out of options. I would also continue my plan of leaving dead things while we walk. That way the grass can't move us off our path. The grass just gave us more bones than Freddy. No reason not to use it. We could use one bone here, a testicle there, an eye there. We'd be able to get pretty far with a single body. Before long, Becky collapses on the ground. She has visions of grass, a grass man, grass in the ass, a lot of grass. Ross suddenly comes out of nowhere and starts doing CPR to resuscitate her. Becky turns out to be fine, but by now the building is gone. And now it's basically the same story as last time.
But I got the golden ticket for any takers.
Ross knows the way back to the road, so they all follow him. But to no one's surprise, he leads them back to the rock. Cal is immediately fascinated by it, with Ross giving a big speech, calling this the center of the continent. Ross claims that the rock is their way out if they simply put a hand on it. As Cal raises his hand, Natalie jumps out of the bushes to stop him. She seems terrified of her husband, accusing him of trying to hurt her, how they can't trust him, while he's just feigning ignorance. She's shocked to see Becky with him, as she found Becky's corpse earlier. Just then, Becky has another creepy vision, letting them know they need to GTFO. Ross, however, won't let that happen. He tries arguing that it's not by chance that they're all gathered here. The rock brought them all together. The rock can cleanse them of all their sins, all their regrets. Touch it and you will be redeemed. Open your heart to it. All it takes is a little bit of faith. Ross is sounding more and more crazy by the minute. Getting trapped in the grass really turned him into a religious icon. Ross Humboldt, family man, father of one. Clinically insane, part-time pastor. Hobbies include collecting rocks, skipping rocks, rock climbing, listening to rock music, and watching movies with a rock. He then follows up his speech with a threat.
If you think I was doing the soft sell because I was afraid of going the other way, well, you got another thing coming.
Travis tackles him to the ground but gets manhandled in no time. Ross fucks up his shoulder and grabs onto Natalie as she tries to escape. He proceeds to crush her head as the others frantically run away.
Oh my god, his arm!
Run away!
Guys, have you ever heard of a red flag? Becky mentions how she feels watched, and just as they round the corner, Ross appears like Superman to save the day. Yet again, that is extremely suspicious timing. Also, just a quick side note, doing CPR on someone who's fainted from a potential heat stroke is unnecessary. But hey, it works, so I mean, whatever. However, when he pippity-poppity plops out of the bushes, the first words out of my mouth would be, "How did you find us?"
You found a way out?
I got to the road, but wasn't gonna leave without my family.
How?
Well, it's not a straight line, I can say that much.
Okay, not a straight line. That tells us nothing. Look, I don't need a 20-minute PowerPoint presentation of his movement, but I am expecting some info. Once we're taken to the rock, we need to prepare for a potential fight. Unless Ross has a car hidden behind the rock, this is obviously not the way out. And if there is no car, Ross has no intention of letting us leave. The fact that Cal immediately darts to the rock while the others stand back and observe is interesting. No one else seems to be tempted by it. There must be some sort of unknown power that attracts him, and him specifically. I have no idea what it could be. Maybe the darkness in his heart, his deepest desires or something? I don't know. Either way, it is of utmost importance that Cal stays away from the rock. Currently, only Cal and Travis are in any condition to fight, and we do not need another mindless zombie after us. As for Ross, I'd say he's a lost cause. Until now, he's been putting up a facade and is no longer the Ross of the past. He literally views the rock as a god, and all his talk of accepting it as a host makes me think he's possessed. Basically, he's gotta go. I actually really like Travis taking initiative and attacking Ross from behind, but the execution is all wrong. Tackling him to the ground and throwing a couple weak punches to the back won't do any significant damage. Now, if we had actually done as I said and picked up Becky's leg, we would have had a valuable weapon. We would have been able to crack his head open before he even had time to react. But I guess for now our arms and legs will have to do. With that said, there are still weak points we should be focused on, such as the eyes, the nose, the throat, mostly the facial area. They are all very sensitive and generally accessible. If all else fails, there's always the groin.
Stop! Touching my dick! Ah! 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 Rolling, go, please, God, please,
It doesn't get more effective than that. If Travis starts getting his ass beat, Cal needs to back him up. Standing there and picking his nose like an NPC isn't helping anyone. A swift kick to Ross's head could certainly disorient him and really turn the fight. As for Natalie, I don't see a way to save her. Ross already has the upper hand and his strength is abnormal. Scratch that, his strength is supernatural. Crushing another human skull is not something you can just put your back into. In order to successfully crush someone's skull like this, you need to exert somewhere around 1100 to 1200 pounds of pressure, at the very least. To put it into perspective, not even the current world's strongest man would be capable of fracturing someone's skull using only his hands. And that's not even crushing, that's fracturing, which takes somewhere in the ballpark of 520 pounds of pressure. That is already double what an average man is capable of exerting. Double that again and you might be able to crush it. And I say might, because the exact number of how much force it would take is unknown. These numbers were taken from a study based around bike helmets, and another study that used skeletal remains. A healthy, living human head might take a lot more. Bottom line is, it doesn't matter how much exercise you do or how much juice you drink.
What kind of juice did he drink?
It is physically not possible for a human being to crush someone's skull. Unfortunately for us, that means the rock god must have given him a massive power boost. So on second thought, maybe avoiding him is the solution. The only problem I have with running is that Ross essentially has grass cheat codes and the Eye of Sauron, so we can see where we are at all times. By sheer luck they find Freddy, or the ghost of Freddy, who leads them to the building they spotted earlier. They barricade the door, pop Travis's shoulder back in place, and start bickering between themselves. Now is really not the time to start arguing. They have a much bigger threat at their doorstep who just so happens to have Herculean strength. Whether Travis wants the baby aborted or Cal wants to fuck his sister is completely irrelevant. Both of them need to shut the hell up and start looking for an escape route. There are 7 functional arms between them, 4 of which belong to a child and Becky who can barely stand. Calling it a disadvantage would be an understatement. Because they wasted their head start, Ross shows up and starts breaking down the door. They retreat up to the roof and lock it with a steel pipe, which would have been a great weapon, I might add. They realize this building is just across the road from the church and scout to see if there's a path home. They spot what looks like a glitch in the matrix, or a hole as they call it. Travis takes a step too far as the roof gives out from under him, but Cal grabs him before he can plummet into the ground. Cal, not wanting to share his sister, yes, that way, drops Travis into the abyss. Ross then makes his way to the roof, everyone leaves the roof, and realizing that Cal did something to Travis, Becky no longer wants anything to do with him.
Beck, wait.
Thought that you would lose your sister when you got out of here. That the baby would bring her and Travis together. You'd be left out in the cold. You're probably right on that score. Your mistake is thinking you're ever leaving.
Cal then gets chased back into the grass, only to get hunted and eventually strangled by Ross. At this point, I'm convinced Cal has a death wish. He continuously puts his own selfish needs ahead of the group's and messes up whatever tiny advantage they have. Dropping Travis off the roof pretty much sealed his fate, because there's no way Becky's gonna leave him behind. Bumping off Travis and then a couple minutes later insist that they're better off without him is nonsensical. If he really wanted Travis dead, the better option would be to accidentally trip him. I don't condone it or think it is a good idea, I'm just saying. As for when Ross gets on top of him, I see only one way of surviving. Instead of crying and wasting precious seconds, he needs to make a deal with the devil being Ross in this case. Cal has to somehow convince him that he'll willingly touch the rock and join their cult. I've seen the error of my ways, I want my sins washed away, that sort of thing. Cal already showed twice that he was willing to touch the rock, and as we all know, third time's a charm. If Ross's goal really is to bring more hosts to the rock, there is a chance he will believe us. If he won't accept the deal, then there is no escape unless some Deus Ex Machina shows up. Unfortunately, Cal's death proves that we are in fact stuck in a time loop. Every decision they've made so far has been predetermined, which means they were screwed from the start. As for Travis, he's still alive and kicking. You would actually have to fall pretty far in order for the fall to be lethal. Based on what we see here, it can't have been more than a few meters or so. Depending on the circumstances, a lethal fall would be anywhere between 8 to 15 plus meters. That's 25 to 48 plus feet for you Americans out there. But as Travis has only 2 feet, he walks away relatively unscathed. While he's reaching out to Becky, she gets jumped by Ross. She stabs him in the eye with some scissors she found, but before she can make her great escape, she gets snatched up by whoever the hell this is. She's dumped back by the rock, picks up her phone, and word for word says, "Don't hurt Travis. Stay together. Yada yada."
Don't let Cal hurt Travis! Don't let Cal hurt Travis! Don't leave him! Just stay with him! Don't leave him! Just stay with him! Or else we're gonna keep making the same mistakes. Hello, who is this? Or else we're gonna keep making the same mistakes. Hello, who is this?
Becky, what are you doing? You're guaranteeing your own time loop. Now there's some real wacky shit that happens, but I have no idea if this is another vision or not, so all you need to know is that she gives a birth. Then while she's delirious and just out of it, she gets fed her own baby by Cal, who turns out to actually be Ross. The others also manage to find their way back to the rock, and we are just in time for the final confrontation. Ross has the upper hand for most of the fight, but with a bit of help from Becky, Cal wins it in the most ironic way, by choking the life out of Ross with the very grass that caused him so much pain and suffering. Becky 2.0 passes on into the afterlife, and with nothing more to live for, Travis gives in to the rock. He puts his hand on it, and we finally see what all the fuzz was about. It looks like the rock is indeed a living organism. It has roots that extend throughout the entire grass, much like that of a tree. Touching the rock allows Travis to open his third eye, so he's now able to see the way out. He pretty much sacrifices himself so Tobin can live, and sends him back in time to before Cal and Becky ever enter the grass. Tobin is just in time to stop them, and insists that they stay out. They get back in the car and drive back the way they came as a big, happy Lannister family.
You don't belong here. Neither does Becky.
So this ending obviously left me with a few questions. First of all, this is a paradox. Tobin stopping Cal and Becky means that they never enter the grass. This means Travis never enters the grass, which means Tobin never enters the grass, which means this whole ending feels very undeserved. The characters didn't actually earn their victory. All their actions were repeated in the exact same way, several times. Becky screaming, check. Becky over the phone, check. Becky dying, check. But then I don't understand how they escaped the time loop. Something must have changed because this Tobin didn't give in to the rock. It also doesn't make sense that Travis stayed himself after becoming a host. They made all the wrong decisions but still won because the movie wanted a happy ending. So honestly, based on the characters' actions, I'd say In the Tall Grass remains unbeaten. Thank you all for watching, I'll see you all in the next one.